reflect on. By the 1980s, there was so much chatter about the sterility, the homogeneity of the suburbs, the lifeless, dreary, dreadful suburbs, cul-de-sacs and all that. And I'll talk more about that. But that was looming large in the background, and because of that, there were the stirrings of the new urbanism. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the new urbanism. But in terms of how America as a country veered into this paradigm of kind of the stereotypical suburban planning, here's what happened. An amazing confluence of events. World War II ends, and so you have all the returning war veterans coming back from the war. You have the unleashing of this incredible pent-up energy of a country that's been at war and has been ignoring basic needs. All of a sudden, those basic needs translate into demand in the market. It's like a shot of adrenaline into the bloodstream of the United States, and growth. Babies were being born, growth was happening, businesses were being formed. So that was one strand of what was happening. But let's think about, in that same time, the automobile, which obviously had been invented prior to World War II, but was becoming affordable for people. And so it was proliferating. So family, prior to the war, some families still didn't have a car. Those that did maybe had one car. By the time you get into the 50s and 60s, it was becoming more and more common for families to have two automobiles. And the Eisenhower administration was focusing on the expansion of the interstate freeway system, and so the car was this new level of mobility that American families had that they had not had before. The government rolled out a new program of government-backed mortgages. It's hard to overstate how important this is, because it used to be, prior to that, you either bought a house with cash, or you would go to the bank and get like a 5-year or 10-year loan, and it's not backed up by anybody, so it was just you and the bank. You'd have to try to convince the bank to let you have the money to build a house. And so when the government started backstopping mortgages, all of a sudden the availability of loans, and thus the means to buy houses, exploded. Then air conditioning, what an incredible thing. You had to be a tough hombre to live in Central Florida, to live in Atlanta, to live in Houston, Texas, Dallas, Texas, before air conditioning. And as soon as air conditioning started to proliferate, the mass migration of people from north to south and from east to west was on. And so they're moving to new areas where there's cheap land, they have cars, and then finally, there was the home building industry itself that suddenly learned how to bring production methodology to the field and build houses economically in a high-speed fashion. And so we had a big housing boom that lasted for decades. And this is kind of how it started. So the war ends, and people are ready to nest and set up their families, and there was this idyllic dream of life in the suburbs. It was so different than the congestion and pollution and all the stuff of the cities. The patio culture, this was the siren call. If you lived in what we now call the Rust Belt, but let's just call it the Snow Belt, and more and more and more you're seeing these compelling images of life in the Sun Belt, where people just slide open a sliding glass door and bring lemonade out to the patio, and planned communities. Levittown was one of the very first planned communities where, again, the high-speed production housing was being delivered. There was the idealism that we were all seeing on television that, the suburbs, it's safe, it's idyllic. It was inexpensive. I mean, you could buy houses for peanuts. You can kind of see here's just like the classic neighborhood street scene. That could be taken right in Celebration right now. So live in the Sunshine Belt, the siren call, again, the kids parading just as they did yesterday here in town, right? The retirees were moving to the Sun Belt in huge numbers, and they'd go and play their games and enjoy a well-earned retirement in a warm place. So this is the kind of stuff. And living in the suburbs was so appealing because the freeways were newly minted and there was very little traffic. So why would you live in town in a small lot or in an apartment or something like that when you could live, a 10-minute drive out of town on a freeway or highway that looks like this? And so you see what I mean? It's like there's no cars. There's all this infrastructure. And so why would you live in town when you could live out here? So see all that land. I mean, the freeways just got striped across cornfields, and so it's just land everywhere. Unfortunately, fast forward 30, 40, 50 years, and you get this. You get this. This is just a beauty. So I invite you to find, if you can, a park. Is there a single lot that was left uncovered? I've looked. There's not, I'm telling you. So people, and you can see this is out in the sticks, so people commute way out to whatever this is to just have a house. And the houses, how about the architectural diversity in that image? You've all heard the joke that you find your house with your garage door clicker. There it is. You just drive down the street and click the button and turn into the one that opens. So, and this is important. So this is, you can kind of make this out, but this is the hodgepodge, the crazy quilt that you get when individual builders we're doing houses that are 2 to 3 bedrooms, from this price to this, this square foot. So this is Pulte, and this is Lennar, and this is somebody else, and each one is doing their own thing. And so the roads don't connect. Do you see what I mean? It's like if you were some kid living in the middle of one of those neighborhoods and you go to school with another kid who lives over here in this other neighborhood, how in the hell would you go to their house? You have to go all the way out to the main arterial, come down, go to his community entrance, then go through the rabbit warren of streets to get to his cul-de-sac where he lives. But this is the kind of insanity that was taking place. Okay? So you can understand as you look at these images and you picture the aspirational, brilliant team at Disney under Peter Rummel's leadership thinking about community, it's not surprising that they pushed away from all this. It's like, we're not doing that. We're not going to do just a nicer version of that. And so it was important to change direction. So some of the things that really stand out, the blandness of the suburbs. This is a classic. So think about, this is a house where cars live. And there's a little mouse hole over on the side where theoretically a human being could go over there, but you never would. You would not. You would, because you would enter and exit by clicking your clicker and going in the garage, and nobody is ever going to be out front of this house. So again, the just incredible sterility. I always think about if you were driving by and you saw one of us walking on that sidewalk on the left, I'm convinced you would come to a stop, back up, and say, "Are you okay?" It's like, what other reason could there be for you to be out there on that sidewalk? It's just desolate, right? So again, the sameness, the repetitiveness, the maze of cul-de-sacs. I mean, this was, well, and by the way, I mean, so I go on Google Earth because, you know, I just wanted you to understand, this is your area here. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to do it. But this is a neighborhood that you know, and if I said the name, you would know it immediately. And I just wanted to point out that, like I've circled, that's like the retail. So all those people live up in there, but if they wanted to actually like go to a store or something, it's fire up the automobile and drive over there. There's no possibility that you're walking anywhere. This is just a classic street scene right here in the hood. This is right near you. And then these lovely strip malls. So here is the great, if I had to circle any one feature of suburban planning, it's based on the radical separation of uses. It's the belief that things like stores, churches, schools are a nuisance. Nobody wants those near where they live. We want those out. Look where they put the schools. I circled the school. So these two, they put them out by the highway, away from houses. We don't want those schools over here where we are. And then the shopping center is up in the upper left, again, pushed away. We don't want that near our homes. So, and that's a classic Florida street scene. Now, just compare that to what it's like to go down any street in Celebration. I mean, this is awful, and nobody is going to be out enjoying this in some passive, a casual stroll out in front of these houses. It's just not going to happen. So it was interesting. So Alex Krieger was the chair of the Department of Planning and Urban Design at Harvard, at the Graduate School of Design at Harvard. And he said, at last, a massive generational change is underway. The archetypal suburb, once the fashionable destination of the upwardly mobile and the aspiration of everyone else, now represents the pure status quo. The grown children of the baby boomers find typical suburbia homogeneous and uninteresting. So that was that bellwether observation. And this sense of disillusionment with typical suburban development is what stood in the background. So there was somebody named James Rouse who served as inspiration to the Disney team. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I want you to understand it's not like Disney, just came out of left field with this notion of building a better community. There were heroes working in this space that inspired the Celebration Company as they started their work. So James Rouse is the guy. Have any of you heard of Columbia, Maryland? Okay, so Columbia, Maryland was really designed and developed by Jim Rouse. Rouse also, it's interesting because in his portfolio, he also is credited with being effectively the inventor of the modern indoor air-conditioned mall, which is, to me, is a monument of suburbia. But at the same time, he was inventing community and thinking more deeply about community than almost anyone else. And I wanted to just share a couple of his observations because I think they say it better than anyone has ever said it. So in 1966, Jim Rouse said, "Modern suburban development is ugly, oppressive, and massively dull. It squanders the resources of nature and produces monotonous armies of housing and graceless, tasteless clutter. It's a vast, formless spread of housing pierced by the unrelated spotting of schools, churches, and stores, like I showed. It creates areas so huge and irrational they're out of scale with people, beyond their grasp or comprehension, too big for people to feel a part of, to feel responsible for, or to feel important within. The individual human being is lost in the mass." And then he said, and this is great. So I see my friend Tom Sonnerborg, you'll relate to this. As community planners, we tend to concern ourselves with terms like consumers, riders, pupils, and vehicle trips. We count dwelling units and parking spaces and play lots and open space. In the urban planning process, we treat human beings as statistics, as units of demand, or at most creatures to be housed, fed, schooled, and transported. By this irrational process, non-communities are born, formless places without order, beauty, or reason, and with no visible respect for people or the land. If we're to humanize the built environment, we must turn the planning process upside down and start thinking about the conditions that are most important to human growth, to man's heart. So this very powerfully sums up this sense of vision and aspiration that the Celebration Company took into their hearts as they planned the community that you guys now live in. And so they're energized. They reject what's going on with suburban development. They're moved by what they're learning from people like James Rouse and Charles Frazier, George Mitchell, who developed the woodlands in Houston. They're energized, but what to do? What to do about it? And so they did something really smart. They said, isn't it interesting that prior to World War II, some of the greatest communities on the planet were built in the United States of America? Seriously. I mean, so they started observing that even on the eastern seaboard and in the southeast, you go to places like Annapolis, Maryland, or Reston, Virginia, Charleston, Savannah. These are places that have one thing in common. They were all developed under what was called the Law of the Indies. And this is when the British colonial settlers came over. The captain, who's going to settle there is given a manual. And it says, there will be a square, a town square. And in the square will be a tree where the king's orders are going to be nailed. And on one end is the courthouse, and the other end is, and it said it can only be so big, and if people live outside that boundary, they are not to be treated as citizens of the town. So there was a way that these early American cities were organized. And it's interesting, and the Celebration team couldn't help noticing that these places were cherished. There were powerful historical societies in each one of these that fought tooth and nail to protect the character of these precious towns. They were loved. After all these years, after 300 years, why? Most of us in this room are old enough to remember fold-up maps. Just remember what it was like. You would look at a fold-up map, and there are hundreds of dried up, burned up little town names on these maps that are not worth driving through today. They're just relics of something that came and went. And yet, so just as an example, there's 90,000 units of government below the federal level in this country. And obviously most of those are small towns. And most of them are unmemorable, to say the least, but some are not. And so the Disney team started focusing on those standout developments, and in particular, focusing on the ones that were built during what's called the Romantic era of community design or neighborhood design in America, which is roughly 1890 to 1940. And so as they would go visiting these places, this is what they were seeing. So the classic tree-lined street, the tight front yard setbacks that create a sense of compression that hold the street together and make it feel so wonderful to walk down the street, unlike those images I was showing earlier. Do you see what I mean, the Romantic era? It's spectacular. And of course, you guys, we live that every day. Right? Seriously, you guys live this every day. So this is what the Celebration team was looking at. And one of the great insights they had is that, it's not about the architecture. So in other words, it's not like there was like some style that if only we could do that style, then, it would be great. They recognize it's not really about that. It's about great planning and urban design. It's about giving a community good bones. right? And then, you know, the architecture kind of is what it is. So they said, and this was one of the things when I first interviewed with the Celebration Company, this was essentially a quote that was shared with me. They said, our goal was to take the proven planning principles from the past and combine them with the best thinking of today to create a community for tomorrow. And that resonated with me. Okay, I get that. So I wanted to comment, because this has been so tragically misunderstood, about what it was and what it was not. And so among the things it was not, it was never a utopian experiment. And so when we opened the community, we had just unrelenting media interest in this new thing that Disney had created. We were making news worldwide, and constant parade of journalists coming to interview us and interview people in this room. You know, you'd get a microphone shoved in your face if you were in the town center. And without exception, we kept being told that this was a utopian experiment. And I can tell you that it certainly, assuredly, was not. It was not. The Disney team never, ever, ever, ever had in their minds that we're going to create a place that will be a bubble that keeps out the bad things, you know, where the realities of life aren't going to intrude here in the bubble. It was never that. It was just a town. That's all that, you know, and that implies all the things that implies. And it wasn't the escape from the pressures of modern life. That was another. There was an implied insult to the early settlers of Celebration that we're all escapists. We were drawn here by the magic of Disney to escape the hustle and bustle and stresses and pressures of daily life and hide out here under the protective wings of the Disney organization. And it was never that. I mean, I knew a lot of you people. It wasn't that. And then there was this, you know, I'm calling it the throwback to Mayberry, but there was a criticism, and it was mostly from the design-oriented people in their temples in the Ivy League design schools, that this was all about nostalgia. It was just nostalgia. You know, it was, you know, they just wanted to go and create this thing with front porches and street trees because it used to be nice back in the day, and, you know, and so they're just trying to ignore all that's happened in the ensuing decades, and so it's about nostalgia. It really was not about nostalgia, not in the least. And then finally, and I think this one I would just ask you guys, listen really carefully to what I'm going to say about this, because it's simultaneously enlightening about what, you know, the way Celebration has been regarded in the world, but it's also one of the most misunderstood aspects of Celebration, and it is that, and if I could rewind the tape, if I could go all the way back to a year before we started selling houses and undo one thing, this would be it. Don't describe this as a town. Do you understand what I mean? Because here's what happened. As soon as the Walt Disney organization announces to the world, we're building a town. It's called the Town of Celebration. It has a town seal. It has a town hall on the town square. It looks like a town, and it has a town manager. Guess what cynical reporters from New York are going to be thinking about on their plane ride to come see this place? Okay, so Disney wants privately controlled, corporately controlled government, not that messy, awful democratic kind that everybody else has. They are creating private government. And I don't blame them for being pissed. Seriously. I mean, if that's what this was about, if it really was, what this was about is Disney with this nefarious intention to create a corporate government as an alternative to democracy, that would be a disaster. And the truth is, what Disney was doing is trying to reinvent the master plan community. That's what they were doing. So we have a homeowners association, just like all, communities have. We have a homeowners association. That's the CROA entity. And the one thing Disney gave us, thank God, is this really cool foundation, which has no power to take money from you, no power to make you do anything. It's just here to help make life more wonderful for people and help people. So, it's harmless. But it's if Disney, all the way back, if rather than saying we're building a town and putting the town seal on the manhole covers and all that stuff, if Disney had said, look, we're going to build a new community. And as we look around at how communities are being built today, we're disappointed with what we see. We think we can do better. We want to raise the bar in how communities are built. And so we're going to try to bring together the best talent we can and the smartest people we can to think carefully about what should a new community look like in this modern age. And, if they had declared their intentions in that way, then I think you'd have had a very different reaction. People on the airplane, the journalist on the airplane ride, it's like, okay, so they're saying that they think that they've identified some better alternatives to what's normally done. I'm very curious to learn what some of those are. It's like, well, great, we can help with that. We'll tell you all about it. But this one thing, and so I was interested talking to Gloria that apparently just some years ago, the town of just kind of got severed and drifted away a little bit. And so now we're just celebration. And I think that's a really good thing, right? Because we're not a town. In all honesty, in all reality, we're not. New urbanism, I just want to very briefly touch on this. So the new urbanism movement was happening at the very same time the celebration visioning was taking place, kind of late 80s to early 90s. The Congress for the New Urbanism was founded in 1993. The foundational documents for celebration were filed in 1994. So you can imagine, kind of in the intellectual soup, there was a lot of crossover between the new urban pioneers and what celebration was doing. On the other hand, any of you who were around at the time may remember, Disney was always careful to kind of acknowledge the new urbanism. Of course, we were inspired by new urban thinking, but they did not want celebration to be considered a new urbanist community. And the reason was, at the time, the new urbanism was a small community doctrine. So the famous Seaside, Florida, where Andres Dewani pioneered a lot of the thinking of the new urbanism, is 80 acres. That's not even one village in celebration. So anyway, so the point of view the Disney team had that I think was valid and correct is that, look, we're trying to follow classic town building principles. And yeah, I mean, some of the aspects of the urbanism overlap, but we're not, a new urbanist community, at least as it was understood at that time. Now, the good news is, here's what's happened. The new urbanist movement, with the passage of a couple of decades, has continued to grow and evolve so that it now, if you take the kind of new urbanist thinking and lay it against celebration, it's almost a perfect match. It's like the new urban movement caught up with what was happening here, and it was just that we were working at such a bigger scale. So, when I left celebration, I couldn't wait to go find out if the lessons learned here in Central Florida had broader applicability. So let me tell you what we did. So I went to work for a company called DMB, which is a developer of very, very large-scale communities, very aspirational communities. And so I decided that we would do a market study using Robert Charles Lesser, who's a preeminent market research firm in the real estate industry. And I just want to share this with you. I think it'll make you appreciate this town you have even a little bit more than you already do. So one of the questions we asked, we were trying to understand how important is community, this community in quotes. Community, not just houses and streets and amenities and the normal vernacular of development, but this intangible thing of community. How important is it? And so we just asked this very simple question. If you had the choice, would you choose a great house in an average community or just an average house in a great community? And an overwhelming 80+% chose the latter. Okay, so that's promising. But look, we took this down to specifics. I don't know how well you'll be able to see this, but let me just take you through it. The first one, would you prefer to live in a community where the home designs on the street are quite similar, or where there's a lot of diversity in architectural styles? A radical response in favor of diversity. Now this is an important observation because I'm here to tell you, friends, communities in the late 1990s were being built with this very homogeneous stucco and red tile architecture where every house on the street looked pretty much the same. And so when you do a consumer research that tells you 85% of the people want the opposite, that's kind of a eureka moment. Can you imagine if that happened to the automobile industry? If right, or the food industry? I mean, you do a survey and you find out that everything that's on the store shelves is inverted from what people actually want. The champagne bottles would come out. Are you kidding me? We're going to revolutionize the industry. So would you prefer to live in a neighborhood where people are predominantly the same, or neighborhoods with a mix of people and life stages? And again, 64% wanted a mix. This was the exact opposite of what was happening. We were segregating neighborhoods by life stage and price point so that all the starter homes are over here, the first move-up homes are over there, the kind of second move-up executive homes are over here. They never cross over. The retirement living was often some other place. Do you know what I mean? So that was what was normal, and here was the customer saying, we don't really want that. We'd rather, have a lot of people, different kinds of people all sharing the same community. Neighborhoods with homes of similar size and price. So this is probing that same thought in a different way, because there was this belief, and I love that this is being proven wrong every day at Celebration, that there was a belief in the real estate industry that if you put houses that cost less in the same kind of neighborhood with houses that cost more, that rich people won't buy the houses that cost more. It'll drag down the value of the nicer houses. Well, look around. Celebration it's like a salad bowl where you just put in rich people houses and middle income houses and lower priced apartments and smaller houses and stirred it up and dumped it onto an urban street and kind of let it all settle out, and everybody lives here, and the houses are routinely, systematically outperforming the market at large in average selling prices. So go figure. A suburban feel. Would you rather have a suburban feel where you drive to shops and schools in your neighborhood, like the image I was showing you earlier, or a small town feel where you walk to shops and stores? 60% wanted to walk to their stores. Would you rather have your garage at the front of your house or in the back? My God, nobody other than the new urbanist communities, which are a tiny fraction of the market, is doing this, and yet 60% want the garage out of the street scene. So this was big news to my company. Do you want your house further from the street where, and typically without front porches, or houses up near the street with front porches? Again, 60% want it near the street with a front porch. More privacy with less interaction with neighbors, or frequent activities and opportunities to get to know neighbors. 71% want the latter. So I want to live in a neighborhood with a small town feel. 85% of consumers say I want that. They're not getting it anywhere else. Do you understand? Like, where, if it weren't in Celebration, where would you go in Central Florida? I guess you could probably argue Baldwin Park would, have something. I'd pay more for a house if there was a strong sense of community, 66.8%. So I'm going to tell you, support your Celebration Foundation, support the CROA, because these are the people who are helping nurture a strong sense of community, which hopefully makes you happier, makes the community safer, healthier, but also more valuable. It's important to me to have organized programs and activities, 77%. It's important that I know my neighbors, 90%. I mean, that to me is the big one, because everything about the suburbs is designed to essentially create neighbor-to-neighbor anonymity. So we have gang mailboxes where you don't hazard the possibility of bumping into a neighbor just to check your mail. You just pull right over there in your car, roll the window down, unlock, get my mail, and then go straight to my click, 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 garage open, pull in there, closed. No neighbor-to-neighbor interaction, period. Do you know what I mean? So designing a community that encourages neighborly interaction is a pretty powerful thing. And then the last one from this survey that I thought was so telling, kind of if you would, I mean, you think about all the stuff that's rated highly at the top, the thing that makes them the same, it's all pedestrian related. I want sidewalks on all the streets. I want walking and biking paths. I want neighborhood schools, not drive-to schools, not school bus schools. I want neighborhood walk-to schools. I want neighborhood parks, not big drive-to amenities. I want a town center. High-speed internet. And now you start getting into the universe of what all the big communities have. Recreational pool, fitness center, basketball courts, baseball fields, recreation center. Yeah. Of course you have that. Everybody has it. Everybody wants that. But there was this very, very clear unmet demand that we want walkable, human-scaled neighborhoods. And so for my company, this was a big deal to get this research that essentially validated what was taking place at Celebration. And so we started focusing on physical planning that's designed to invigorate community, to cause casual and spontaneous interaction between neighbors. I want you to just think about a simple thing, is when you bump into a neighbor, another resident of Celebration, you just bump into them in the town center, on the sidewalk, wherever that may happen. You know what tends to happen? Social promises are made. You know what I mean? Oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in weeks. How are you? Where have you been? Oh, we should get together. Isn't that what we do? We should get, well, what are you doing this weekend? Well, I don't know. Well, why don't you guys come over on Sunday? I'm going to do some roast chicken. But social promises get made, and every time those promises are kept, the fabric that knits this community together gets woven a little tighter. It's very, very powerful stuff. Neighborhood crafting. So the thing that the Celebration team did, I think better than I've ever seen it done anywhere, including in my own communities, is this commitment to the quality and richness of the street scene. So our friend Joe Barnes, who I'm sure a lot of you remember as the town architect from back in the day, he used to have a couple of things he would say that I wanted to just call out. He used to talk about the walking experience, and he said it's a very simple formula. It's not rocket science. He said, you just have to have a path to walk on, you have to have places to go, and you should have interesting things to see along the way. Not rocket science, but just think about, the walks you take in Celebration around the lake to the town center. You wend and maybe take a different route every time, right? Because there's so many interesting things, the beautiful little parks. We used to, when I was here, we would refer to the parks in an interesting way. So in Boston, they have a system of parks that's referred to as the Emerald Necklace, right? Very compelling image, the Emerald Necklace, parks scattered around and then woven together with a pedestrian network. And so here we would talk about the parks as the charm bracelet, right? Because everyone is different. Hippodrome is nothing like Veranda Park, is nothing like Arbor Park, is nothing like Longmeadow Park or Savannah Square. So each park has its own identity, and it has civic dignity in the way that it's structured. So quickly, and I'm going to spend just a moment buzzing through these, but I wanted you to know where all this went for us, because I've had the chance now to take all these learnings and apply them in so many different locations. But so DC Ranch in Scottsdale is 8,300 acres, has won all kinds of awards. It's absolutely beautiful. So this was our kind of mixed-use center that would be something like your town center. Guess what I named the main street? Market Street, right? It has all the little shops and stores and all the fun stuff, and it is, it has the community foundation. It has so many of the features that we learned here. And this is kind of what it looks like. Now, this is a very high-end community because of where it's located. But just absolutely gorgeous architecture. But look, this is a front porch. I mean, it's the same basic ideas expressed in a different location. And then Verrado, if Celebration has a cousin, this is it. Verrado is a big community, 8,800 acres. It is a new urbanist community. It has the town center. It's set in the toes of the White Tank Mountains in Arizona. So here is our Main Street grocery store that would look to all of you originals just like Goodings. It was the same thing. We built this before the first resident moved in, just like we did here. We couldn't justify, all the retail, but yet we knew we needed a grocery store, so we went and got the best grocer in the market, put them in here in a smaller footprint, just like we did with Goodings, subsidized it so that they could be there for the early residents, and then we grew into it, okay? So let's just kind of, the Verrado Middle School is right by the town center, just like the Celebration School is right by the town center. So thousands and thousands of families are impacted by the lessons here. Ladera Ranch, 4,000 acres, 8,000 units. Just look at the imagery. You can kind of understand this is the lessons carried forward. Rancho Mission Viejo, 23,000 acres. This is the one we're in the middle of right now. Absolutely gorgeous. And again, you see the DNA, right? This is California, so it doesn't look exactly like the southeastern United States architecture, but you see the DNA, don't you? Right? Eastmark is an amazing community we're in the middle of today, 3,154 acres. This is where the Apple Global Command Center is located. Lots and lots of employment uses going in there, but again, a fabulous community. And I even took these lessons to the island of Kauai, where we're doing a very large community called Kukui'ula. And that's the land, where the project is situated. But again, if you just squint a little bit, you'll see that Celebration DNA shining through. And guess what? Even in Hawaii, even in expensive second homes, people love a sense of community. And they love charm and character in their street scenes. This is what it looks like. That's a wonderful restaurant there. So the community farm is there. So each of these was influenced. But listen, I got to be clear, if it just stopped right there, that's thousands and thousands and thousands of families already touched just by the little bit that I've been able to do. The truth is, there was a diaspora of talent that flowed out of Celebration back in that time. Sonnerborg went on to win all kinds of awards. Don Kaloran, Charles Adams, Todd Mansfield. We all scattered. We all found root in different places around the country. We've all built amazing new communities, and each in our own way, carrying forward the lessons that were learned here in every case, and then trying new things. And, you know, and then we talk and we visit each other's communities, and I see you tried that. How did that work? And it's either thumbs up or don't do that. Okay, I won't. Right? So the importance of what's going on here is phenomenal. And I'm going to close just on something very quickly. And that was that I think in some ways, despite how powerful Disney's efforts were in the physical planning of Celebration, they also picked up on the dissatisfaction with what was taking place with homeowners associations in this country. So again, let me give you just a little bit of perspective. So just like those dreary suburbs, Robert Putnam is a professor of government at the Harvard School of Government, or at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. And so he made the observation, if we examine our lives and not our aspirations, and if we compare ourselves not with each other, but with our own parents, the best available evidence suggests we are becoming less connected with one another. So in other words, in prior decades, when most of us lived in the pre-World War II environment, bonds that held America together were stronger. And then as we moved to the suburbs and all the anonymity of the suburbs and the busy lives we all lead, he identified the contributing factors. He said the pressures of time and money, lengthening work hours, technology, dual income families, automobile-centric planning, that all of these things, the pervasive busyness was his kind of way of summarizing that we were becoming less connected with one another. And the homeowners association that we would all have in our little subdivisions was starting to substitute for neighborly problem solving when there was something wrong. And people were really getting grumpy about homeowners associations. They're starting to be regarded like the IRS, like to get a letter from your homeowners association that some neighbor ratted you out, that you parked on the street or you left your trash can out an extra day because you were out of town. Or, I mean, the rage that somebody would, are you kidding me? I've lived here for 7 years, and they have the gall to send me people would be so upset by what was going on with homeowners associations. And so the CC&Rs were being substituted for citizenship, because again, back in the old town, if you were leaving your trash can out all the time, I might walk over as your neighbor and say, hey, can I offer just to help? I noticed your trash can is staying out. You must be terribly busy. Can I, you know what? I'm sorry. I got it. Thanks for mentioning it. I'm on it. I'll deal with my trash. You know what I'm saying? Neighbors solved problems. As soon as there's a homeowners association, that stopped happening. The neighbor would call over to the homeowners association, would you send a letter to my neighbor? He's been leaving his trash can out. Or his son is playing rock music in the afternoon after school and bothering, And so it's call the homeowners association. Homeowners association calls. The person's head explodes. Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. So that was very much what was going on. And so I'm just telling you, both from the experience at Celebration and the experience that I and others have been having in these next generation communities, these are observations that you can carry forward, that you can work with Gloria to carry forward in this community. One is, don't make the community an island. So Celebration is part of a big county called Osceola County, and I want you to think about the fact that whatever it may look like to you, it's very easy for folks in the county to view us in here as the richy, it's all special, it's Celebration, and for there to be just kind of simmering resentment. And the burden is not on the county to make that relationship healthier. The burden's on us. And I'm using the inclusive we because I was here and I remember all this stuff. But constant, repeated efforts to be the bigger person in the relationship, to keep reaching out, keep trying to make Celebration a net positive for Osceola County, and I don't just mean in property taxes and stuff. Maintain an authentic and ongoing dialogue with stakeholders. So like most homeowners associations, people grumble about stuff, and the more that there is just open two-way communication, the more whatever those concerns are kind of get attended to and dealt with, rather than bubbling over until it's a big issue that really creates damage in the community. Distinguish yourself by the way you handle conflicts and disputes. So one of the biggest sins that homeowners associations commit is this bureaucratic culture where it's based on the principle of bad precedent. That I'll give you an example from long ago in my career. There was a guy who got a fine for a trash can that sat out there for a week. Trash can sat out for a week, and he got a letter and then a fine, whatever it was, $10, whatever it was. A fine was levied because of this. The guy comes to the next homeowner association meeting and he says, look, I'm sure you guys had no idea, but my daughter was killed in a car wreck. I got a call at the office that day. My wife met me at the airport. We took off, and we were gone. And I know my trash can was out, and I apologize. I had no intention of having it happen, but it did, and I'm sorry about that, but could you guys please just see your way clear to waive this fine? And they say, well, first of all, we can't discuss it with you in the room, so you're going to have to leave, and we'll notify you by mail. And they notified him that they couldn't waive the fine because if they did, it would set a bad precedent, right? And people will be coming in here all the time wanting, with whatever excuse they may have and insisting that we should waive their fine because they heard we waived your fine. And that is a cancerous malignancy in a community, a homeowners association that begins to behave as a thoughtless bureaucracy rather than like neighbors trying to help each other and solve problems. And so I would just urge just a constant commitment to avoiding the bureaucracy and just being neighbors and helping each other, and don't worry about bad precedent. Adopt local schools. You guys have been so good about this all through the years. Throw your arms around those schools. Those kids, I'm telling you, one of the great things about Celebration, I saw it again today in the architectural tour, this is a community that's built where the managing partner at the law firm, the heart surgeon, the rich owner of a business can live in the same town with the teacher that teaches his kids and the police that patrol the streets and the firemen and the ambulance drivers, and guess who else? Kids. These kids who grow up, and rather than like, well, I could never live with where my parents live because they've got money and they live in this affluent suburb, so I'm going to have to start my life somewhere else, and maybe someday I'll get to live where my parents live. No, they can get a job after college, get started. If you just got a little bit of money, rent one of the apartments over the garage, right? I mean, we've done such an incredible job here making this an inclusive community where everybody can be part. Be supportive of nearby businesses. So even today with this big population, every one of the little businesses in the town center, and I don't even know what we call the one up on 192, but whatever that is. Yeah, so those merchants, they're just trying to make a go. And so, when it's coming up on Christmas time, you guys are going to be shopping. I mean, at least pull up and say, well, maybe I won't order every damn thing on Amazon. Maybe I'll go spread a few bucks around here in town and, kind of help out these folks that are trying to make a living. Provide frequent social gatherings, support block parties, building parties, and establish community traditions, which the foundation has done so very well. So, the last thing is the new community volunteers. So the problem with homeowners associations, to be honest, in most cases, is the people, if you're ever in a community meeting for a homeowners association and somebody stands up and says, hey, so everybody, we're going to have a vacancy on our board of directors, and we're just looking for folks who might have an interest in running for office. The guy whose hand shoots up, me, I want to do it, that's the last guy. You don't want that guy. That guy has a whole that needs to be filled somehow. You don't want them filling it in the homeowners association. The one that you want is the one you have to kind of talk into doing it. You know what I'm saying? This is like when you recruit leaders, Gloria. I mean, you're identifying people. You see something in them, and it's like, hey, have you ever thought about it? We could really use some help. Like, we could use your judgment. We could use, you know. And so this thing of being a community volunteer is so very important. And I know everybody's lives are busy, and you know, it'd be easy to just let it be somebody else's job to be the community volunteer for whatever, you know, needs volunteering for. But it's really, really important stuff. And if you agree to do it, and you check your ego at the door, and you say, look, I'm only going to have this little assignment for a little while, and I'm not going to change the world. I'm just going to help out my neighbors and try to be a good steward and leave the position better than I found it. Those simple commitments, I can't tell you how powerful an impact they can have. Is that, yeah, I mean, so anyway, when you get the high sign from Gloria, the tap on the shoulder, have you ever thought about, would you consider, we could use some help on, do it, volunteer. It'll be great for celebration, and you'll probably have some fun too. So I'm going to stop there. So there you have it.
Thank you, Brent. That was fantastic. I learned a lot. I appreciate it. Brent is willing to take a couple of questions. If you want to come up and ask a question, come on up to the mic and we can get it started. So, questions.